Good morning, Cyber Warriors. I'm going to go over a few things here. I'm going to cover some of these initial things fairly quickly. They should be review. If they are not review, I have previous videos on all of those. Please go find those videos and get the more in-depth details on what I'm about to cover. We're going to start with our basic window and open up PowerShell from here. This larger and bigger so we can see what's going on in here, and we're going to talk about a couple of the first basics, right? So what's the purpose of this and some of the initial commands. The purpose is to be able to do command line activities. A lot of the things through the command line are a lot more streamlined. It also allows you to get familiar with the process and being able to do scripting, which is important. So let's get into some of the basic commands. So things you might be familiar from the regular command line. dir is now get child item, and I need to fix that. There we go. Get child item. You see they're the same, or you can use the alias of GCI, and that provides the same content there. So there are various aliases for a lot of the different commands. In fact, if you're familiar with the Unix versions, ls will provide the same type of thing. Another one that is very useful is get help, and we can ask it about get command. And it'll provide basic information about that help file. Also, if you use command, works the same way, right? So there's a lot of Unix and Windows portability between them to make it easier for some people to transition from a Unix environment to scripting within the PowerShell or Windows environment. And there's also PowerShell ported over to Unix systems as well. The other thing that is incredibly useful is get member. So if we do get child item and we're going to pipe that to get member, it actually will go and tell us what each of the different property types and information about all of that stuff, which is really important when you're trying to make the differentiation between a string or an object. Strings and objects are very different things within PowerShell. String is just a series of text, and object is anything, right? So if you do your get child item, you're looking at an object on the system, and it treats it that way. And so there are different things you could do with that. Let's set a quick variable. So your standard hello world, we're creating that as a string variable, and boom, there it is. We can see it is simply the text hello world, but if we pipe that to get member, you see that it is listed as a string, where before we had system IO directory information, which is an object. And there are different things that you can do with all of these, transforming it or not. By all means, explore the different commands, look at the different stuff. You can do get command, and you're looking for anything with, well, I should break down the commands briefly. So the commands are broken into a verb and noun portion, right? So the first part of the command is the verb. So we're going to take a look at where all the commands where the verb get is part of it. You see there's a ton of them, lots and lots and lots. What if we want to use the noun, which is the back half, and we're looking for local user? It's much smaller. You see that there's a much smaller subset of these. Set, rename, remove, new, get, enable, disable, all standard things with local users. If we get local user, it shows that there's only one actual account on this particular system. And that's fairly standard for a lot of things, but in a corporate environment, you should have your local administrator account, maybe one or two other accounts in there. You shouldn't have a ton of stuff, especially for corporate-owned assets. If you have personal computers, if you have like 5-6 people in the household who share the computers, you should have 5 or 6 different users for each of those. And they shouldn't all be administrator accounts. You'll notice that the account that I am in, because it shows it here, is not the default administrator account. Because this is good security practice. You don't want to log in by default as an administrator. You want to be able to escalate to administrator properties, but that's a longer conversation for much later. Okay, so we've gone through some basic stuff here. One of the other commands that's going to be pretty key being able to move around in the environment is set location. You keep tabbing to autocomplete, and you can do relative paths, and relative path is based from where you are to where you want to go. So if I wanted to go one folder deeper, I would do a dot backslash, and then I can tab through all the available options, and this moves me one folder back. Now, if I wanted to go back to that original directory, it is dot dot set location dot dot, and it puts me back into the training folder. Now, if I wanted to go multiple, let's go back into B-sides here. If I want to go back multiple directories, it would be slash dot dot, and it puts me into the actual regular documents folder as opposed to my training folder. You can also use, set location is quite the mouthful, you can always use the standard CD, which stands for change directory, and we'll go back into training. And LS, we have a bunch of different things in there. Nice, simple, easy. You can also do absolute paths. Absolute path would be something along the lines of CD, and I'm just going to go to the desktop. Oop, dire dirt. There we go. See, ton of stuff. Actually, not a ton of stuff. All just shortcuts because I don't do anything on my desktop. Alright, so back to the original path. We're going to do that as an absolute path again. And you'll notice that I want to put that in quotes because there is spaces here. Always good to remember when you have an absolute path, you probably want to include quotation marks on either end of it to make sure that it understands this is one string or one thing that you're trying to get done with it, so it doesn't think that you have the first part and another part and another part based off of spacing. New thing we want to cover is creating new documents. So you're going to do new item, and this is item type, and what we want to do is create a folder. So this would be directory. So autocomplete is your friend. If you are not sure what you can have in there, you can go through all of the different options. That makes it a lot easier than trying to guess or spell, because my spelling is bad. Tab is my friend. So we're going to create a new directory, and we're going to call this Mastering PowerShell, and I have it in quotes because I'm including a space. And it shows that is your new directory, so we're going to change directory into that, and you'll see that it automatically will include the quotations if you need. if you just start off, so I just typed cd space m and it knew because there were no other m folders, otherwise it would tab through all of the options. And now I'm in there, and we could do a directory listing, GCI as we should be doing, and you see there's nothing in that. It created an empty directory for us to be able to use. This is very useful for when you want to do exports into a new directory, or if you're going to create a new file in a new directory. So I want to get a copy of, let's pull that PowerPoint, right? So copy item, and this is, we're going to go .. / unleash, and you see it automatically grabs the first thing alphabetically, and we want this one, and now we see it is in this new directory. Okay, so just a couple more things with getChildItem or GCI, and that's filtering the results. So basic entry is going to provide you directories and file names, and there's a couple of different ways to peel that particular potato, right? So maybe you only want to see directories or files only, very specifically. There's many different ways of doing it. I'm going to show you 3 different ways. The first one is through the pipeline, right? So GCI, and then we're going to put this into where object. So where object can be shortened to just the question mark. And I'm going to show you this way because it makes it simple. When you're scripting, never use shortcuts. Always spell out everything. But for this, it's going to save on a lot of typing. All right. So now we're going to put this where we want to take a look at the results, and this result here, the $_ represents the variable for the result. So all of the things that are coming up before are all different result factors. And so what we're going to do is we're going to apply a filter where a where condition exists. So what we want to do is we're going to do the PS is container, and we're going to encapsulate that. So now you see the results are pared down to just folders. Now, that's a really complicated way to do it, and it's a great way programmatically to do it. However, there's built-in processes that we can use, which are a lot easier to remember. So we're going to get rid of all of this where stuff. And I know, you're like, but Kilt Guy, why did you show me the where stuff? Well, because it's important to know and understand for later. But for right now, we want to just have the directories, so we're going to do dir and tab, and it autocorrects to directories. You see it has the exact same results. Now you can do the same thing. Instead of directory, you could do file, filter file. There we go, and it provides the file information. Now there's yet another way, even simpler, right? So everything is about making it easier to type out, right? So we don't want to type out directory because that's a lot of letters. We're just going to do AD, which stands for as directory, and it gives us the directory. The same thing applies for file. AF will be as file, and it provides that information. There are other pieces of information that we can pull out of all of this, and that is looking at more properties than just the mode, last write time, length, and name. There are a lot of different categories and properties that are on the information. So what we can do is we can actually do a get member for it. So we're going to do get child item for unleash that, right? So here is the basic results. Okay, now we're going to put that into the pipeline. Select object and property, and we're just going to do everything in here. So these are all of the properties that exist for that file. You have the PS path, the parent path, PS child name, the drive, the provider, which is the file system. You see the PS container reads as false. So that means when we're looking at these things up above, where PS container, that gave us where PS container was true, which meant that all the files which are false were not displayed. Coming back into this, I have a bunch of different things, a whole lot of different timestamps for all of these. These are really easy to be able to manipulate and work from. The length, there's just a lot of information that is available. So maybe you don't want to see all of those. Maybe you just want to see the creation time and last access time and last write time. So we can pull all of those things. So, and I'm going to cheat by doing all of my times in UTC. So we're going to do get child item, and we're going to do files and select. And this is a shortcut for select object, so you don't need to spell all of that out. And we're going to do the property. It's a dash PR property. There we go. And we want the name, and we want the simple path. So let's just do directory, and we're going to do all of the times with UTC. So star UTC. And now we see the results. It shows us the name, the directory it's in, the creation time, last access time, and last write time. These are all very useful stats, especially when you're going to be doing any sort of forensics, being able to get all of those particular bits of information. And that is all of that for get child item and all of the fun associated with that. So we're going to clear a screen, and we're going to start talking about variables. I know I talked a little bit about variables with the sample one that we created, but the point of variables and operators, which we'll go into as well, is to be able to create temporary objects or strings or information that you can recall later, which can be applied to any number of contexts and criteria. Simple things that we can do is we can create variables to call them later, right? So I'm going to create one called name, and this is going to have a space, so Kilt Guy. Alright, and then we're going to do age. And again, all variables start with a $sign. And I am 50, so there it is. And you notice I didn't put that one in quotes. I don't have to. And so now I'm going to do write host, and we're going to put this in quotes, and name is age in quotes, and it's going to give my name and my age. Kilt Guy is 50. It's just a thing. So it's a really simple way of being able to create information and then display the information or use it in a context later, right? You can even do some interesting formatting things, right? So we have get date already exists, and it provides a long bit of information. But what if you don't want to have all of that strung out in that way? Maybe, and what I like to do is I like to create something with the date as a prefix for the name, so I know when I created that object, and I can recall it, or I can sort by those things easily without having to go into the attributes, which is especially handy if you're moving something from one folder or one file to another, or system, especially if you're moving from one system to another. It'll actually change like your last write times and those sorts of things, which get things a little bit confusing. So what I like to do is I like to actually create a variable based off of the get date. So I'm going to do current date equals, and we're going to use that command from before, get date, And I'm going to tell it to format it in a specific way. And the way I'm doing this is I want the 4 digits for the year, so Y, 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 Y. And then we're going to do capital M, double that, right? So we need to have 03 for March to make sure that it's standard. And then lowercase dd. And it's broken up this way so that it understands that we're talking about year, month, day, as opposed to year, minutes, day. So we have it here. So we're going to take a look at current date. And there you have it. And this military format is applicable for a lot of different things and makes things easy to work with. And so we can actually go further, right? So we're going to write host wow, I am unable to type right now. Boom. You're not always going to be printing stuff to the screen like this, but it is handy, especially when you're putting things into a script, that you'll be able to recall it and print it to a screen. So that's a really simple thing about variables. You can either manually write them, or you can get them through a command or an output from a command, which we just did with the current date. So there's a number of different ways to create variables, and I have a lot more on variables in another video. We're going to carry on, and now we're going to start talking about operators. And operators are how you are going to do changes to current information, especially variables, whether the variable is like a list or a hash table or just a straight up text string like we had before. You can do your arithmetic, so your addition, subtraction. We can do those sorts of things, and also what's called modulus. Modulus allows you to actually apply certain criteria and context, and I'll show you that one. No, let's just do a standard addition one, right? So simple math, right? Math is a variable that doesn't exist, so we're going to create math equals 0. So now we put in math, and it tells us 0. So now we can math plus equal 1. Simple. Now math equals 1. Or if we want to do math plus equal 17, now math equals what? 18. Simple solution and operation. So we can even do this and divide that by 9, and we have 2. If we go back into math, it didn't change it because all we did was apply the change to the actual variable itself, which goes into the modulus way of doing things. And I'm going to show you through a different way of looking at it using new time span. So new time span is a way of getting the calculus between what happened before and the current time, or any period of time in between. So I'm going to just do a start time of 1912, which is when Arizona was incorporated as a state. So let's just do that. And we're going to do an end, and the end is, we're just going to do get date. And see, I put get date in parentheses so that it tells it this is a command I want you to run. So here it is, your criteria. The first part, we're going to give you your start time, and then your end time is based on how long it has been. So we see it's been 40,928 days since it was incorporated as of today, which is the 5th of March. So looking at this, and we want to just look at just maybe days, right? And you notice that there isn't years. So let's actually, in order to get the number of years, we need to start applying additional context. To do that, we're going to encapsulate the entire thing in parentheses, and we're going to just call out for days, because that is one of the bits of criteria that exist in there. So now we have 40,928 days. Now, how many years is that? Well, how do we figure out how many years has occurred? How many days are in a year? 365, right? It's not exact because we have leap year every 4 years and a couple other things, so we can actually do 365.25, right? That's close enough. It's not quite the same, but close enough. So that's going to give us 112 years since Arizona's been a state. Happy birthday, Arizona. And that is the modulus way of doing an operator to the information. So you're spelling it out and we're applying the criteria after the fact, and we're not actually changing any of the information, unlike we did earlier when we did the plus equal. And also, any of the arithmetic stuff will work with that. So instead of plus equal, let's do minus equal 1. That should give us, what is it now? So math should now be 17, right? 17, there you go. And we could do times, let's do 3. There we go. Really simple, too easy. And that's a shortcut way of being able to do all of the arithmetic stuff and all of the arithmetic operators to those pieces. And speaking of operators, right? So equal sign itself is an operator. So we're going to go back into math. We're going to now create it. So equal is an assignment operator. So we're telling it you are now this thing. So math is now 10. Math is now 10. So you can do comparison operators. So comparison is where it is equal to, less than, not equal, greater than. So there are a number of different ways of showing that. And so when we're talking about equal to, alright, so it's a little bit more complicated, but what we could do is a simple if statement here. So we're going to do if math equal 10, right? Simple, easy, except that doesn't quite work right. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to encapsulate this in parentheses. So if math, this little equation, is this right post math is 10. And we're going to end that with the curly brace. So everything within the curly brace is going to be our end result, as in, if this first criteria is true, I want you to do this extra criteria. So everything within the curly braces is the output of everything that matches and meets the criteria from the first part. So if math equals 10, write math equals 10. So I'm going to do this. It's going to provide, yes, math is equal to 10. So if I'm going to change this operator up here, and this is a comparison operator, and I want to say any for not equals, it doesn't provide an output. Okay, so we can do other kinds of comparison operators, and these are less than or equal to. Okay, so it is equal to that, but if I change this to less than or equal to 9, it doesn't work. But if I change this to 15, it does provide the information because it's less than or equal to. Now you could also do greater than. So GT So this doesn't mean is equal to, right? So there should be no result here. Math is not greater than 10, it is 10. So GE equals greater than or equal to. I'll show you that. GE greater than or equal to versus GT, which is greater than. And you can do the same thing with less than. So less than or equal or less than. LT versus LE. And those are the simple comparison operators. There are a couple of others we're going to go over, like logical operators. Those are and, those are or, you're not. These are your comparisons of this and that, or this or that, this, not that. And those are the things that are a little bit trickier to get into, but we're going to do that just right now. Operators, which is the and or not. These are a little more complex to write, but they're still feasible to do. So again, we're going to go with a really quick if statement for them. We're going to do if this statement here is true, do a function or thing. So we're going to do if, and then we're going to, oh, it has to be in parentheses, and we're going to do a quick age equal, wait, no. So we want to do this, right? So not age equal 50. And then the squiggly do's. So right post age is not 50. Oops, forgot the end, and we completed with this end of the squiggly do. Whoops. I accidentally hit two buttons at once. So, right, so age is 50, so it didn't do this, right? So if we're going to do if age is not greater than or equal to, right, greater than. See, there we go. And this is really not a good example of how to use this. It's just an example of how to use this. Not is an interesting thing where it can mean a whole lot of stuff, right? So I actually invalidated the statement because what I've got in there is not correct, right? So what I would actually probably have to do is change this to write above 50 for it to be a true statement. So that's true, right? So it is not above 50, it is 50. But there's a whole lot of wiggle room below that, which is a problem. So this is where you want to do other kinds of comparison operators. And these comparison operators with the logical operators allows you to compare, let's do math and age, since we have both the numbers and variables, right? So if we have to do an inside, right, because we're going to have this first statement. The first statement is math is less than 20, and age is greater than 40. So we have, this is a statement, this is a statement. Here we're comparing those two, and we have to have them all encased in the parentheses. We have a squiggly do here, and we could say that math is less than 20 and age is greater than 40. And we want to have this match the criteria that we put into our parentheses, right? So we have understanding. And yes, sure enough, these are true. And we want to do an or. We want to say if one or the other is true. So we're going to make sure that not both of them are true. So this will be if, and again the doubles, when we do math, is greater than 0, or age less than 50. Greater than 0, or age is less than 50. So one of those is true. Now we can also, weirdly enough, make it so both are true. And it still comes up as a true statement because one or the other is actually factual. Since both are factual, the answer can be ambiguous. There are certain reasons why you would do this type of comparison. There are certain use cases for it. It's just important to understand that these are possibilities of using for evaluating different criteria. These aren't the greatest examples of how to use them. They're just examples of how to use them. So next we're going to go into string operators, and these are just ways of concatenating strings together. And a couple of different ways to do those sorts of things. An example here, we're just going to clear the host again, and hello plus world. And it gives us hello world all in one full thing. So what we need to do is we need to add a space. So now we have hello world. So strings are operating in very specific context. So if we want to create a file name, for example, we can do the first one and do current date plus hello world. Or we can do this, which makes it a little easier to read, underscore plus hello world. And that makes it so we can add even plus doc. Doc. So this is a way we can format a particular string and add it into a way that we can have as an output for a file name or something along those lines. This is often how I do it, just kind of working my way up into that particular context. Always check each step as you go along to make sure that you're getting each step of those correct. So another thing to do with operators is the type operators, and that is evaluating of whether or not the information you have either in a command output or a variable is of a particular type of information. For example, we know that age is what? What is that called or considered? A number is considered a variable. No, sorry, not a variable. It is considered an integer. Especially a whole number is an integer specifically, right? So if we can do age is int and evaluates as true. So this is a true statement. To use that in a for loop, you would do if age is this, host age is a number. Oop. Age is a number. And so there are different ways of doing this, but how do you know which types there are? And that's a matter of looking at additional information. What are the different types? You have integers, booleans, strings, and floats. What are floats? Floats are numbers that are not whole numbers. They're like decimal numbers, fractions of numbers. And you can do comparison operators with those, and it's very handy when you're doing context where you are requesting information from a user or operator and in your scripts, and you want to make sure that if you're asking for a number, they give you a number. If you're asking for a float, they give you a float, or a boolean or a string. You can check to see if those are true with a very simple, the is true element. One of the things that I talked about very briefly earlier was with the variables. I talked about an array or hash table, and what those are in simple terms is just a series of bits of information that exist within like a variable that can be called up. An example of doing, there's a couple different ways to create an array. First one would be just like colors equal, and we're just going to do a comma separated list. So we're going to do red, green, blue, and we have colors, and it shows you red, green, or blue. Now you can access each of those different ways, and so we're going to call up, we only want the very first one, and that is red. Remember, with computers, you always start from 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So the first thing in there will always be 0, not 1. And it can be a little confusing when you're doing it that way, but it is not a human interpretation. It is the computer or machine interpretation. So if we want to look at the third one, we just do that. Doesn't have a third one. Remember, it starts with 0. Since there are only 3, we do that. So we can add additional things to it. So we're going to do adding in a new color. So we can do colors plus equal yellow. And now if we bring up colors, it shows yellow is the last one. And we can do a quick little 1 through 2. There we go. Not 1 through, you have to call them out specific. But there's ways to get after multiple pieces of those bits of information within an array. Okay, so we're going to talk real quick about conditional statements. We already did some ifs, which are if this is true, do this particular output. Now, there's loops that you can do using else or else if, and we'll go into those a bit later. But I want to do really quickly what switch does. Switch allows you to evaluate the criteria that's in a variable and create a custom output based off of that, as opposed to just doing an if statement where it's just these sorts of things. It gives you some additional options to choose from. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick little thing here, switch, and we're going to do fruit, because why not? So you notice I just hit carriage return and it dropped me down a level. So this is going to allow us to separate all the things we want and not actually execute it until we're done. So we're going to give it some options, right? So we're going to do apples, because why not, right? So if it is an apple, we're going to write the host and if it is banana, host bananas need to be peeled before eating. Let's see. Orange host and we want default So this actually allows us to do a little bit of error checking without actually doing any try, catch, or some other error checking methods. Oh, I see what I did wrong. Okay, so the variable is unknown because we didn't actually define what fruit is. So if we define fruit now, fruit equal banana. Okay, now we have that defined. We can go back in, we can run this, and it says bananas need to be peeled before eating. And it's just a simple way of doing all of that criteria all at once early on, and it's very useful if you know the output and outcome that you should have, right? So we had different states. Default is a state that exists if there was no actual answer. The variable didn't exist. It didn't error. It just simply gave us, we don't know what this is. We created our own custom error based off of an unknown state, which is a handy way of doing that. It's a simple way of doing all of those things, especially if you know what the outcome is supposed to be. If you only had a handful of different options, this is a great way to do it. And this takes us directly into using loops to do other things. Usually we do a for loop or a while loop. These are chosen based off of context you have, right? So if you know exactly how many iterations something has, you can choose the best way of exiting that loop with grace, right? So if you have 10 options, a for loop, you can iterate through all of those, or while this is true, you can do it until then, or while this is false, you can define something along those ways. So let's show a really quick for loop. So this is for, and then we're going to do I for integer because we're going to do that, right? So integer equals 1, and then we're going to add a criteria to it, and so where integer is less than or equal to 10, and then we're going to give it a math operator. So we're going to do integer plus equal 1, or actually let's do this. So instead of doing plus equal 1, you can just simply do plus plus and it equals the same thing. Add 1 to the previous iteration. I'm going to do that, and we're going to write post. Okay, so what should the outcome of this be? Now take a moment, think about it, answer in your head, and now let's take a look at it. Count to 10. Simple, easy. It's going to iterate all the way through. We know it's only going to go to 10 and then exit gracefully. So a for loop is a wonderful way of doing something where we have a finite number of repetitions that are going to go through. If we have an unknown, like if we're looking at something that's got 10,000 lines and we're asking it to look at all of these things, it may not be a best thing to just print out each and every one of those lines. You want to add additional context or criteria to it. Or you can add a while loop to those things, and we're going to show that here. So we're going to do this in a slightly different way, and this is where we're going to sit there and create a variable where we have the number, so count equals 0. And we're going to while count equals, well, actually, less than or equal to 10. Forgot that. I'm going to write host count. And we're going to count plus plus. This is going to add to it. But you're saying, but Kilt Guy, this is going to do exactly the same thing as the other one. You're correct. There are two completely different ways of doing that. The for loop is a great way of doing all of the calculations in the early bit and all of that, where the while loop is usually better at pulling information in from the outside. They can be used interchangeably most of the time, but they are different graceful ways to exit them based off of the criteria that is in there. And there's other ways of doing all of these things. There's definitely more than one way to peel that potato. Alright, so this ends Module 1 of Mastering PowerShell. So in this one we covered a lot of different basic structures that you need to use in order to accomplish your particular mission. But this is the foundation in which you build all of the rest of the stuff. And I hope you join me in the next video, which is all about working with scripts. Good luck, happy hunting, and I'll see you in the next video.